All right, let's jump on in.
Excellent.
Michael, welcome to
Thank you, sir.
Manufacturing Happy Hour.
Yeah, glad to be here.
It's exciting to be on your home turf this time back in Milwaukee. It was good getting to know you a little bit out in, what was that brewery we're at in San Francisco?
You know, it was right outside San Fran near the airport.
Yeah.
It had
Bear
some
Bottle.
wonderful,
Bottle.
wonderful sours, as
Yes.
I recall. Yeah.
Good sours, good IPAs. It was a
Yeah,
good way
yeah.
to start. We can imagine that we have them today, but we're here, and this building is the new Northwestern Mutual building, right?
It is. It's a beautiful facility for those that haven't had a chance to get down here. I'd encourage you to stop in. It's certainly a pleasure for us at SteamChain to have the opportunity to work here.
Yeah.
So we're really excited about our relationship with Northwestern Mutual and to be part of their Cream City Labs.
I was going to say, what is Cream City Labs a little bit, so we got some more context.
Cream City Labs is, and I'll do it the best I can.
Sure.
Cream City Labs is part of Northwestern Mutual. It's a venture group that invests in startup companies, specifically in the Milwaukee Metro, and provides not only the capital that they need to grow their businesses, but also the office space and the facilities necessary to make sure they've got a professional place to work out of, and covers some of the costs of that as well. So it's a great opportunity for us at SteamChain to have professional facilities, wonderful environment, an office right down on Milwaukee's beautiful lakefront, and to be working amongst such great people here at Northwestern Mutual is also a pleasure as well.
Yeah, it was nice getting a little tour of the spot. It's cool to see how far these Midwestern cities have come with their innovation centers, for lack of a better word.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So before we get too far into the interview, I want to make sure I give you a proper introduction, though, for our audience. So our guest today is a manufacturing business leader turned entrepreneur with 20 years of experience in the industrial world, advancing through corporate roles in product marketing, engineering, and business unit management. Our guest today recently took the startup leap and founded SteamChain, a machine-as-a-service company based here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, that's helping manufacturers take their plant performance and productivity to the next level, changing the way machine builders and end users collaborate and partner with one another. Ladies and gentlemen, founder, CEO of SteamChain, and industrial jack of all trades, Michael Cromheecke.
Well, what a wonderful introduction, Chris. Thank you so much for that.
No problem. It's
very
great.
Much appreciated.
It's great to have you here. And I threw out one term in there that many people might be hearing for the first time. That's machine as a service. So since we're here in downtown Milwaukee, let's say we're hanging out at the bar above the Pfister, Blue, great cocktail lounge, and someone's like, what is it you do? What is machine as a service? How do you explain it to them in the most basic terms?
Yeah, so in the most basic terms, anytime you have a scenario where the performance of an industrial asset is used to calculate the payments, the financial transactions between parties, we would categorize that as a machine-as-a-service solution.
Yeah.
And this can take multiple different forms, and I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to talk about some of the ways our customers are using this technology.
Absolutely.
But really, it creates new opportunities in manufacturing that previously only existed in industries outside of manufacturing. So when you think about it, in terms of an example, the office printing market converted to this years ago very successfully, right? It was one of the early as-a-service business models where instead of buying printers, you began to just pay for the pages that you printed, and your partner would show up with the appropriate machinery that met your requirements. You would sign a contract, and based on your usage of that equipment in your facility under your operating conditions, you would have an operational cost as opposed to always having a capital cost and the maintenance of cost associated with managing those assets themselves. Somebody else would take care of that for you, and you get the result.
Yeah.
Right. And
It's a great comparison, by the way. The printing market makes so much sense for what you're doing.
Yeah. And there's some differences between that and manufacturing,
Sure.
which explains why it didn't go that way in manufacturing ages ago. But we think those those differences are being solved now by a lot of the industrial Internet of Things or Industry 4.0 technologies and investments that companies are making. So we think the convergence of that really opens up the opportunity to deploy some of these creative business models in the manufacturing sector.
Yeah.
It certainly has in other sectors, right? When you think about IT hardware. That's a more recent convert to an as-a-service business model.
Yeah.
Right? 20 years ago, everybody bought their own server and managed their own infrastructure, and that's an uncommon choice nowadays. People are far more inclined to be, signing up with somebody that's handling all of that hardware for them, so they get the service that's provided by that hardware, they get the capabilities, and it becomes a well-managed operational expense for them where they can scale it to what their current needs are.
Yeah.
And so another example of as a service, and there's many of them out there, right? It's not a new business model. The question really for us was, how do you make those business models available in this market?
Yeah.
What are the unique challenges? What are the difficulties? Right? And there's lots of them. And, but with the new technology, there's lots of solutions to some of those historic hurdles that have prevented these business models from being widely adopted in our market.
Sure. And I do want to dig into those a little later in the interview as
Absolutely.
well, too. Those are great comparisons, really helping to start contextualizing where, traditional equipment manufacturer would be providing a machine as a service comparable to, like what you said, the latest evolution is it's so common in the IT space now. And then before that with the printer example, I absolutely love that. And that is a good bar conversation as well, too. I would understand that even after a martini up on that top floor. But I'm interested to get a little bit of your story first,
Sure.
as we get going, because you had like a 19-year career at Rockwell Automation?
Yeah, I think technically I was there for just over 18 years.
Okay.
And so I think I think this is my 20th year in the industry.
All right.
And I spent the first 18 at Allen Bradley, Rockwell Automation. And it was a wonderful way to learn the business, and certainly had a lot of opportunities there and made a lot of friends.
I was going to say you had no shortage of different roles from if I remember, like product marketing, commercial engineering, business unit leadership. I mean, you were really covering the gamut over there.
Yeah, I did a lot of things. I was fortunate to be provided lots of opportunities, and I certainly learned a lot. From my early days when I was started off as a field service engineer.
Okay.
For the motion business at Rockwell Automation. So, I always tell people when they ask me about my backstory and kind of how I came up with this idea, I talk about my early career when I was the guy that would get on the airplane when the people that built the machine and the people that were running the machine could only agree on one thing.
Okay.
Which was that it's all Allen Bradley's fault.
Okay. Yeah,
right?
The finger pointing.
The finger pointing part, right? When the machines aren't producing, everybody's suffering, but it's a zero-sum game, right? And nobody wants to own the cost of the resolution, the cost of the investigation. And, one of the things that makes Allen Bradley a great company is they never let their customers fail. So when these situations happen, they are, they're very willing to come in and get involved and help adjudicate those technical issues and commercial issues. And
100%.
That was my role in the early days. And I always thought there could be a better way.
Yeah.
I always felt like everybody's spending too much time trying to figure out whose fault it is, when clearly the lack of performance on the asset is causing everybody harm. It's causing harm for the reputation of the OEM. It's causing harm for the end user who's trying to run production. And how do you, instead of having a finger-pointing scenario and a blame game, how do you ensure that everybody is rewarded when the machine is running optimally,
performing well,
and everybody's facing the same risks when it's not? And what we're talking about is financial risks, right? So there's a cost to everybody involved when the machine isn't performing right. And by doing so, can we create alignment between those parties so that everybody approaches the problem in a way that is in their best interest to help solve the issue as quickly and efficiently as possible?
What I love about your background is it sounds like from an early time in your career you were already thinking to yourself, there could be a solution out there that addresses this and really gives a joint performance reward, if you will.
Yeah, I think it may be a little bit of a overestimate to say that I had the answer at that time.
Sure.
But what I would say is I was clearly aware of the problem. And I always saw the problem as a difficult one, but the opportunity to solve it is huge. There's a lot of inefficiencies today and it doesn't just manifest itself in terms of underperforming assets, right? I think the most harmful thing is the lack of confidence in investing in new manufacturing technology.
Yeah.
Right. And what we see is people tend to buy the same machines that they've always purchased using the same technology that they're comfortable with from the partners that they always work with.
Yeah.
Right. Because doing anything different than that represents risk.
Right.
And in manufacturing, risk is a bigger part of the equation than cost. Right?
Yep.
Because risk of downtime is much more expensive than the machine in most scenarios.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's not just how do you optimize the machine, but how do you give people confidence to invest in that new technology?
Yeah.
And, you know, I kind of frame this up, and this was much later in my career, but I ran the independent moving cart business for Rockwell Automation as they began to invest in that in new technology with the motion business. And one of the biggest challenges wasn't necessarily convincing people that the new technology had this great potential. It was convincing them that they would see a financial impact from that potential.
Yeah.
That there wouldn't be hidden costs or reliability issues in the early stage. So how do you motivate people to move forward to adopt that new technology, that stuff that's on the cutting edge that has so much promise, but it's yet unproven?
Yeah.
Right. And it's another way that you can kind of look at the idea of the as-a-service business model to say, how do we build a contract so that everybody's interests are aligned?
Yeah.
We believe the machine's going to help you. We believe it so much that we're going to put a contract in place that ensures that it does.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what that's ultimately what SteamChain does.
Correct.
And I've got a follow-up question in terms of where you came up with the idea, but let's get some definition around just SteamChain in general.
Sure.
We already know what machine as a service is, but what's the elevator pitch, just so there's context for the next questions?
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, the challenge is when you try and deploy a machine as a service business model in the industrial space, they're myriad. To start off with, it's how do you collect that data in a way that's objective and transparent, and everybody can trust the provenance of it, so that it can be used to execute a financial transaction.
Yeah.
Right. And today's systems are great, but they're very one-sided, meaning somebody owns the data system, somebody owns that data. And I always talk about it as Excel spreadsheets, because in my career I've seen this way more often than I'd like to admit, where the level of sophistication of sharing data between organizations is literally collecting it in an Excel spreadsheet and emailing it to your partner in some other organization.
I've seen it plenty, even
right.
We all still see it.
We all still see it
this day and age,
right? But if and that works fine if it's a small agreement, a narrow set of metrics that you're tracking, but it falls apart very quickly when you try and do anything at scale.
Yeah.
And so there needs to be a better way to share that data, to share it in a way that all parties are confident they have equal and equivalent access to it, and not just the data, but the computation.
Yeah.
Right? Because ultimately what we're doing is using that data that's coming to us in a secure and transparent way, and we're sharing it with everybody in real time, but then we're transforming it into a financial transaction.
Yeah.
Right? And today, the person that computes that and then sends the bill to the other party, the question always becomes, well, did they compute it correctly? On what business system? How do we audit that? How do we all verify it? How do we keep everybody in lockstep? And, this is a problem that's relatively easy to solve if you're selling office printers.
Sure.
Right? Because the people that are purchasing them are purchasing all their office printers from one company, right? They're very familiar with that company. They know what it is, and they've got a system in place to manage that.
Yeah.
And if anything does go wrong, there's ways to resolve it. But in manufacturing, you have multiple different types of machines from multiple different suppliers of machines,
right,
running all at the same time on one plant floor. In that scenario, you don't want 27 different organizations supplying 27 different bills based on data that you don't necessarily have equivalent access to. There's no single version of the truth. And of course, you're collecting all your own production data. Yeah. So it's just very difficult with existing technology to try and build a system that would manage that at scale.
Right.
And of course, that's why we felt like building an open system that was agnostic and able to link to all those machines on your plant floor really opened up the possibilities for the as-a-service business model in manufacturing.
And one thing, at least this is my first impression about it, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're fundamentally changing the relationship between an equipment supplier and an end user at that point.
Yeah, we like to think so, right? And we like to think we're improving the relationship.
Right. Well, because it becomes an ongoing performance-based relationship ultimately. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And it's important to note here, the answer is it can.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
These are choices, right?
All right.
How we structure the contract is a choice between the end user and the OEM.
Okay.
We don't dictate the terms, right? Which creates a lot of flexibility, so it can do a number of different things for those parties.
Okay.
But it's really up to them to decide how to contract.
Okay.
What I find interesting is today it's a one-size-fits-all solution, right? People buy industrial assets on a milestone-based delivery process that usually starts with a down payment, some kind of design complete payment, a factory acceptance payment, and a site acceptance payment is the traditional model.
Yeah.
It's been that way since the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
Right? And at the end of it, it kind of culminates after you deliver the machine to your customer's floor and help them get it installed and turned on and running at rate. It culminates with a bunch of people standing around with clipboards and saying, yep, we agreed to this and we've proven that, and we agree to this and we've proven that. And then everybody goes their separate ways.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then if there's problems after that, because of course these machines are intended to run, 10, 15, sometimes 25 years, right? So ultimately, at that point in time, right at the delivery of the machine, all the capital goes one way and all the risk goes the other.
Yeah.
We don't think that's
an interesting way to. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
We don't think that's a great solution. We think it's the de facto standard. The reason people do it that way is because that is the traditional way to manage risk in the transfer of the asset.
Right.
Going all the way back to the Industrial Revolution, but it only represents one way to do it, right? And everybody's doing it effectively the same way. But the market has a desire, and we see this all the time with our customers, right? We didn't come up with this in a vacuum.
Right.
The market has a desire to do it other ways. And oftentimes people try and write those things into the contract. But when they start to write more complex terms into the contract, the problem becomes, how do we manage that?
Yeah.
How do we administer it from a bureaucratic perspective? And so we've talked to many machine builders that say, yeah, we do it, but we got to be really careful. We can't do too much. It's got to be simple to measure. It's got to be something that we're really clear on, because otherwise we're just creating more problems and things to argue about.
Right.
Right. And that's not the intent. So the desire to have this kind of flexibility exists within the market. People have been trying to do this for quite some time. What we've identified is that it really needs an automated business process, a system.
Yeah.
And so we built SteamChain with the intent of kind of connecting those dots for these companies that want to contract in a different way, as opposed to just defaulting to the standard that's been the method since the Industrial Revolution. And the punchline here, I know you got a follow up, but the punchline here is, the reason we can do this now but couldn't do this 10 years ago is because of the evolution of Industry 4.0 technology.
Okay.
Because the data is now available. Machines are smarter. Machines are more connected. The customers are more and more comfortable connecting their machines to a cloud-based system. The data is now available. Yeah. We think we have the right idea at the right time with kind of all the other things in place so that we can easily execute on these business models for our clients.
So many different things I want to ask around it.
Yeah.
And we, I think the first spot I'm going to start, since we have a lot of folks that are in the manufacturing industry that have either started their own company, thought about starting their own company, work for an equipment manufacturer and end user right now. One thing I'm curious about, you had this idea, you had the inspiration, you had the experience, but you had been working in corporate for nearly 20 years. Was there a moment where you said, I need to leave and make this idea a reality?
Yeah. I don't know that there was a single moment.
Sure.
Right? I think always in my career, I've been very entrepreneurial, both inside of the corporate establishment, But always thinking that, ultimately my future is going to include, trying to build a business. And I've built businesses at Rockwell Automation as well.
Yep.
And it was very satisfying, and I learned a tremendous amount. But an idea like this was really so far outside of Rockwell Automation's core business. There's really no place for it in a large corporate environment. It's a little bit too new, a little bit too much on the edge of, I don't know about the technology, but the business model, everything changing all at once. And so, I knew I wanted to. I knew I wanted to take a stab at building a business, and I really had been spending my first 18 years thinking about picking my time and my place. For many years I thought that was going to be to try and go into building machines myself, but that's a extremely capital intensive competitive market,
right?
And you have to have that really unique idea. And so when I did decide to leave Rockwell Automation and start thinking about what our unique idea is, I was really looking at the industrial Internet of Things and all the marketing and all the discussions that people are having in this area. But I was left unsatisfied. When people talk about the industrial Internet of Things, it sounds to me a lot like if you build it, they will come. Right? Back, what was that movie?
Field of Dreams.
Field of Dreams. It felt like Field of Dreams, right? Is connect your machine to the network and good things will happen.
Yeah.
And of course, there's lots of interesting stories about what you hypothetically can do with that. But the market isn't seeing a lot of that stuff take off at any kind of scale at this point, from what I was able to observe. And so as we kind of took a look at that and really in combination with my co-founder Tom Tichy, began to think about why these things aren't scaling. Why is the rate of adoption of Industry 4.0 technologies maybe not as dramatic as people would like to see? We realized that a lot of the value propositions required a substantial amount of work to set up each and every time. And I don't know if that makes sense, but said another way, it's not scalable.
There's a lot of customization that goes into it.
Correct.
And there's not necessarily a system around
There's not
it,
a system. It's one thing to connect. How do you use that data to create value for yourself and for your customers, right? And the traditional approach, if there's anything traditional in the Internet of Things, the traditional conventional wisdom is you're going to use it for preventative and predictive maintenance. You're going to monitor the machine, and it's going to give you indicators of things that are coming down the pipe that you can, through pattern recognition and artificial intelligence, identify before they happen and rectify, saving yourself downtime events, improving and optimizing the performance of your assets. We think that's spot on, absolutely. The challenge is for every application, those algorithms need to be set up, they need to be customized, you need data scientists that are capable of doing that work. And so for narrow applications, it'll work great when there's the value there, but that's not scalable across every machine. Said another way, there's no one algorithm that I can put on every packaging machine and make that packaging machinery run better.
Makes sense.
Okay?
Yeah.
So if that's not the reason why I connect my machine to the internet, or if that's still out in the future a little further, what can I do with the data today? What value does it have today? And we started thinking, hey, it's not the big data.
Yeah.
It's not every sensor on the machine, every piece of information and massive algorithms. Isn't it interesting to people just to know how the machine is performing in terms of throughput? Isn't it interesting to know what its availability is? How much time does it spend shut down or faulted? How much time does it spend running? And when it is running, what rate is it running at?
Yeah.
And what kind of quality is being produced on that machine? Right? What we're talking about here is the constituents of the overall equipment efficiency, the OEE calculation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We call that the little data.
Yeah.
That data's on every
It's a
machine
good name
in the
for
field.
OEE, overall equipment effectiveness, for anyone
Yeah.
not familiar with the term, but I think most people listening to this are familiar with
Probably,
that
yeah.
metric. But ultimately the best, as far as I'm concerned, the main metric for measuring machine performance, correct? Or the pinnacle metric, I should say?
I would say it's the financial driver of every industrial asset.
Okay, I like the way you said it
Right.
better. Yeah.
And which should be, right? I mean, look, these aren't Ferraris,
Yeah.
right? People don't buy them so that they sit in their garage and they can look at them and wax them on the weekends. These are assets that, if they're not running, are worth nothing, right? Nobody wants to own a piece of industrial equipment for the sake of bragging to their friends,
Yeah.
right? The value is completely measured in its ability to perform some function. High availability, high throughput, high quality function, right? And so when you boil down why people invest in these things, it boils down to those components.
Yeah.
And if you can measure those, you understand what the return is. And once you understand that, you can create contracts that share the risk, share the reward of the asset.
During the second half of the interview, I do want to dig into that a little bit
Sure.
more. As we wrap up this first part, though,
Yeah.
I am curious with everything you've gone through so
Yeah.
far in this process. What was the biggest thing you've learned over the past 2 or so years of doing SteamChain so far, through the validation, getting funding, all of that goes into creating everything you've mentioned, turning it into a reality?
Wow, that's a big question. I mean, I've learned so much. The market is so much bigger than I had realized. Across the board, there's so many different players that, within one company, within a handful of roles, and I had lots of roles, but within one company, you gain a certain perspective and a certain visibility to the market. But when you change it as drastically as I had to start a startup company, the network you develop, the perspective on the market you gain, the visibility and the understanding that you develop, I think it was really eye-opening. And so, yeah, I've learned as much in the last 2 years as I probably did in the 10 years prior to that.
Yeah.
In terms of the market and just different ideas, different concepts, different players, different organizations. Like, right now we're sitting in one of the world's best insurance companies.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And my network is influenced by financial services and insurance and venture capital and a whole bunch of people that I wouldn't have otherwise been exposed to during the normal course of my day at Rockwell Automation. So that's been very refreshing, but it's also meant a lot of work,
Sure.
a lot of catch up,
No doubt.
and
No
a lot
doubt.
of learning.
Love that. Well, we're going to take a short break. We're going to dive into SteamChain here a bit more when we come back from the break. So for those of you listening, we'll be right back. Check, 1, 2. Check, 1, 2.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
All right, still got that FM radio DJ voice going on.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's one my greatest asset. That and my beard. I'm gonna go with.
Okay. All right. 1, 2. Radio voice and beard. Well said. Well, aside from radio voices and beard, we're back. Beards. We're back for round 2, and a good way to start the second round of these interviews is with a little story. And in this case, since you have such a what I would call a unique cutting edge solution for our industry, a business model that is just making its way into the industrial space to an extent for the first time as really for the first time as machine as a service. What's a story that can help paint the picture of what this looks like when it's executed for the folks out there that are listening?
Yeah, I mean, we always love to talk about Pearson Packaging because they've been a great champion, kind of early stage. We've been working with them for going on 9 months now. And they're true believers. It was you appreciate this, Chris, as a sales guy.
Yeah.
You talk to so many customers, and there's always a process that you go through to educate and explain what you're doing, and then you get into the value proposition and how it works out for them and how it works out for their customer, and you're justifying it and educating at the same time before you get to the point that everybody's comfortable to move forward. But every now and again, you walk into a room and they've been sitting there waiting for you to come in. Meaning that they've been wanting to do this for quite some time, and they've been struggling with how to execute it. They actually made a couple of attempts at it, but the challenge was always in the administration of it. How do you do it at scale? How do you track it? How do you manage it in a way that that is efficient? So you're not just building in a tremendous amount of costs associated with executing the business model. And of course, we started off our pitch like we usually do by explaining machine as a service and why we think it's a big deal, and their eyes just lit up.
Yeah.
And it was, gosh, we've been exploring this, investigating this, trying to do this forever, and we totally agree with the value proposition, and we understand how what you're doing is a solution to the problems we always ran into.
Sure.
Right? And so gosh, that's a great day as a salesperson. Right?
I was going to say, I wish I could have more of those meetings.
Yeah.
They happen from time to time, but they're not necessarily the norm.
They're not, although it's not the only time we've seen it. So we do think we're really serving a vacuum here. And very much are on the cutting edge, and there's plenty of companies out there that have been having these discussions in their boardrooms when they talk about their forward-looking strategy and how to take advantage of the latest technology.
Yeah.
But yeah, Pearson Packaging, so they moved very quickly. We worked with them to build the financial models, and that's always how we start with our customers. We don't really want to get everybody involved in a whole bunch of technology deployment until everybody comes together and agrees that there's a business model here that's going to be helpful to their customers and to them, and help everybody make improvements. And so we do the consultation on that. We build the models. And these can be extremely sophisticated models. In their case, they're measuring various constituents of OEE, and they're using that to set a payment based on the performance and throughput of the asset. And they've built around that an entire commercial program that they're actually launching here next week at Pack Expo 2019 in Las Vegas.
Cool.
So it's the number one thing that Pearson Packaging is going to be showing on the floor, and they're putting together a whole commercial program for all of their assets, giving their customers far more options for how they invest in new technology and new machinery.
Yeah.
And it's based on per case prices.
Cool.
So instead of buying a machine and hoping it produces results, you're really operationalizing the cost of case packing in the case of Pearson Packaging. And if people want to read about it, I'd encourage them to check out OEM magazine. Search for Pearson, search for SteamChain.
Okay.
It's all written up in PMMI's
awesome
trade publication, and so it's a pretty good story.
So for those of you listening, I will make sure to have a link to that in the show notes for this episode, so you'll be able to jump right to that. What's interesting is as you talk about coming up with the financial model that makes sense, and we talked about this when I was back in San Francisco learning about this the first time. I always have to wonder what the CFO is thinking in this type of discussion. Because you're starting to do things, particularly for an OEM, like you're making changes that are going to impact the statement of cash flows, the balance sheet.
Absolutely.
How do you get a CFO bought into this? Or
we run the numbers with the CFO to start.
Okay. So that's like the first pass, or one of the first steps.
When I said we really start by consulting on the business model, and the people that we're working with. Generally, it's the CFO.
Yeah.
It's the CFO. It's the ownership or management of the firm, and then after that, it's the salespeople. Right. It's defining the programs. It's putting together the plan for how you're going to market it and how you're going to present it to the market, where the value resides and how you extract value from it. Right. We are a manufacturing technology company in a way, but that is, when you look at how we lead and how we go to market, we're really a financial technology company.
Interesting way to put it, yeah.
That's servicing the manufacturing space. Now, all of our team, myself included, we have the strength in the technology side. And one of the things I've had to learn, and fortunately, through my experience at Rockwell, I've had plenty of opportunity to do business modeling and understand the balance sheets and how you're recognizing revenue and doing all that stuff. And so I've been able to put that to very good use, consulting with machine builders on how this improves their financial performance.
Yeah. No, that's awesome because as I being an equipment manufacturer account manager, that's one of the first things I think of. It's like this is fundamentally changing the conversation you're having with an equipment manufacturer partner, and on top of that, you're talking to people that you might not always be talking to within that business. Like you said, the CFO is really the person that you're running the numbers with, if not the leadership at that business. Earlier in the conversation, we talked about the parallels between IT as a service as well, or I should say like software as a service, that model, and then comparing it to the printing example. But what are the unique challenges you're seeing in the industrial market? You mentioned there, it's not a one-to-one relationship with what you're doing with what the other markets are doing.
Yeah, great question. I'm glad you asked it. I think it's important to point out, right? Because everybody understands how these models have been successful in other industries, and then they try and draw the parallel to how you do it in manufacturing. And in manufacturing, the world is a lot more complex. If you're selling office printers or jet engines or IT hardware, there's not a lot of diversity in the product offering. But when it comes to machinery, there's customized machinery, there's standardized machinery, there's configured machinery, there's machinery that packages things, that processes things, that, the market is, in terms of the fragmentation, there's so much more diversity. There's so many measurements, different measurements of what performance means, what is throughput in each and every scenario. Unlike a lot of those other machine as a service, markets where machine as a service has been effective, they've got a much narrower problem to solve, and so it's easy for them. If you're General Electric, to build a custom telematics package with all the links back and manage each one of your jet engines in a consistent and similar way. But in our world, a packaging machine is very different than tissue making equipment. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so those measurements need to be set up every time. And the financial models need to be much more flexible. The other thing is you need to make sure there's complete transparency to that data, that everybody's seeing the same data at the same time, that everybody clearly understands how those calculations are occurring and has equal and equivalent access to that. And we think that really solves that scalability problem. So one single platform can support any number of different assets, but it does so in a way that the dashboards are all consistent. You can easily track down, why is my payment $100 today? Yeah. What is the data that drove that? What are the terms of the contract? And it's all completely visible to everybody.
So I just want to make sure I've got the right understanding, even since there's so much customization in this space, versus a printer versus every type of machine under the sun. Yep. While the equipment's not consistent, the financial models, there's some consistency there. Is that correct?
What I would say is we've created templates.
You've created templates, okay.
For what we consider to be the most attractive or common business models. Okay. And those templates can be configured.
Got it.
Within the platform to represent the agreement between the parties. And if it doesn't fit neatly in one of our templates, we can create a custom template.
Got it.
But those templates are, think of them like objects in the platform. And so, what they all have in common is there's data coming in. Okay. And there's a financial result on the back end. Yeah. Right. And so from the platform's perspective, what resides in the middle, the template, right, is the smart contract. It is the manifestation of the agreement between the parties. And so we can scale the platform and we can put multiple machines on it. We can compare those machines' financial performance, right? Because at the end of the day, it all results in a financial transaction. At the beginning of the day, there's measurables that drive it. Right. Right. And so from a platform perspective, it doesn't matter how many machines I have. I can look at my daily balance. I can look at how much it cost me across assets. I can say how much did this class of asset cost me versus that class of asset, even if those templates are all different. And so it's a very flexible yet very scalable solution that we've been able to create.
So if I think I heard it right this time. So data's coming in, and you get a financial result on the back end. Yep. That's the most common thing. And then in the middle of that, that's where those templates exist. Correct. And those can be customized as needed.
Correct.
And one thing I think I do want to make sure the audience knows is that your if I read this right, your technology is based on blockchain, which is a buzzword that people tend to throw around these days. But I like that we've had this whole conversation up to this point, really talking about what the result is, and then that just happens to be the enabling technology behind it.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing it up. I mean, we're not a blockchain company.
Sure. No, I wasn't saying you were. But.
No, I know you're not. But gosh, I feel like I've given this speech so many times. It probably sounds like I'm not being defensive on it by any means, and I'm glad you asked. I truly am. But it's important for our customers to know that we're not trading cryptocurrency here.
Right.
And so just a basic kind of level setting on blockchain. Blockchain is the technology that enables cryptocurrency markets.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And so a lot of people see it in the news and they see it, lined up against, the latest price of Bitcoin or the fact that Ethereum went down 200% or whatever it is.
Whatever the flavor of the week is.
And so we're sensitive to people thinking that we're somehow a cryptocurrency company. We're not.
Yeah.
What we've identified is that blockchain technology as a data management utility is uniquely suited to address the challenges of delivering machine as a service in our market.
Yeah.
Because it creates the objectivity, it creates the shared ownership of that data, which is huge, right? We tend to prefer to refer to our technology as shared ledger technology, as opposed to blockchain.
I was going to say that's synonymous with blockchain.
It's synonymous
for
with
anyone
blockchain,
that's plugged in with it.
but it doesn't have the same cryptocurrency Bitcoin feel for a lot of our customers.
It's interesting. I would not have expected that to be the challenge, where it's like, oh, you're a crypto company in some regard.
Yeah, and maybe we're overly sensitive to it. But,
sure.
We're very much a Midwestern kind of meat and potatoes sort of company.
Yeah.
And we really feel like we're making a difference to the industry, and that this is for OEMs and machine builders and American manufacturers, that this is a great opportunity to do things different and change the game and help improve their businesses. And so we just want to be very clear that working with SteamChain does not imply that you're somehow trading cryptocurrency. So
I dig it.
Yeah. But shared ownership of data is a huge problem.
Right.
And today your choices are really, trade Excel spreadsheets like we discussed earlier, right? Which is neither secure nor reliable, or build custom connectors between your SAP system and your customer's Oracle system, or your customer's Salesforce system, or your customer's, customized SAP system, or the myriad different business systems that they have today. And as soon as one party upgrades their system, then everybody's got to rejigger all those custom connectors. There's no good solution for kind of a continuous sharing of data between corporate IT systems. But we think we think that SteamChain creates that opportunity with our implementation of blockchain technology, shared ledger technology. Truly, everybody has equal and equivalent access to the data. It's stored in a centralized place that, regardless of any one of the parties, regardless of the OEM or the end user or SteamChain, that data is always going to be there. It is always going to be the exact same data that went in on the day that it was recorded. And you're always going to be able to look back and say, how did we end up making this payment?
Yeah.
It truly is a secure ledger technology, a shared ledger technology that no party independently controls.
I love it. Well, I love the shared ownership aspect of it, because I feel like that's a huge part of everything you do. And the reason I did bring blockchain up is I think, especially when you talk about anything with Industry 4.0 remotely related to it, I think people get really caught up, Industry 4.0 or the Internet of Things, people get really caught up in the technology, and they forget it's all about, the results. It's all about the data. It's about the financial model. And it took us maybe 30, 40 minutes before we even got to blockchain. So
yeah, it's all about the Benjamins.
Yes.
How some people would say. Right at the end of the day, it's about the money.
You have a more hip way of describing everything today, Michael. I'm digging it.
So, but that's the key, right? I mean, at the end of the day, again, I'll go back to nobody buys this kind of equipment because they enjoy having it in their garage, like you would or a painting on your wall, right? This beautiful piece of art behind us today.
Yeah, people watching this will get a view of that.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry. That's right. It's a podcast.
That's okay. It's okay. That'll encourage people to head to YouTube at some point.
But people invest in this equipment because they expect a return.
Yeah.
And there's two sides to that coin, right? There's the upfront capital, and there's the risk that they're taking, right? So you're spending money to make money. You're spending money for an uncertain outcome. So the more you can align the money you spend with the outcome you're receiving, the more reliable you are at making investments in advanced manufacturing technology. Our entire goal in life at SteamChain is to help facilitate investments in cutting-edge manufacturing technology to improve the performance of end users and machine builders.
Ooh, that's going to get quoted later. You know that, right? But, I guess going on that, since we're nearing the end of our interview, I'm curious, you're seeing a lot of different customers these days.
We are.
What's the most common challenge you're running into that folks are struggling with? Because I imagine some of the people listening are having some of those same challenges.
Yeah, that's another good question. Thank you for that. The number one thing that we hear is, hey, Mike, that's great, love it, all that's good, but I can't just afford to build machines, give them away to my customers, and get paid back over the 15-year life cycle.
This is like an equipment manufacturer saying this.
From the OEM's perspective,
Yes.
right? I get the potential, I get the opportunity, but how do I, I don't have the flexibility on my balance sheet to make those kinds of investments on some sort of annuity payment, especially in the transition, right?
Yeah.
Once I'm up and running, great.
Sure. Yeah. Once the system's
but I got to
in
cover
place,
the cost of building all this equipment,
Right.
Right? And I can't absorb that infinitely on my balance sheet, and that's a very realistic challenge to deploying machine as a service. And we really address that in two different ways. Number one is we aren't promoting for a full-blown usage-based financing solution, right? It's not an all or nothing, and so we've developed stepping stones, ways to deploy machine as a service, but not necessarily for the complete cost of the capital asset. We call this, and this is one of our business templates that I discussed, one of them is we refer to as performance warranties. So instead of saying, hey, we're going to align our interest by you paying per unit on the machine and I'm going to deliver the machine for free, right? We say you're going to purchase the machine, but in combination with that purchase, you're also going to purchase a performance warranty.
Okay.
We might lower the upfront cost of the machine.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
And then, so basically, instead of saying it's 100% machine as a service or 100% capital, we can split the difference.
Okay.
We can
That's
say
huge.
it's 50-50, or you're going to spend 70% of what you otherwise would have spent on this machine, and 30% is going to be based on performance, right? We can set that level wherever the two parties want it to be set. All right, and so a lot of our clients will look at it as, hey, Mike, if I can just get them to cover the cost of the machine, I'm more than happy to risk all of my margin based on its performance because I believe in my equipment.
Yeah.
Right. And so that could be where they decide to set that line between operational and capital. Okay. So that's number one, is it's not an all or nothing proposition. It can be deployed in steps. The other way we do it in steps is, instead of saying it's the entire machine, you buy the machine as you normally would, but on that machine there's capabilities that can be turned on or off. So the OEM can invest more in software, invest more in capabilities that can be sold separately of the machine.
Okay.
That can be enabled and disabled and paid for based on the usage. We call that feature management. And it's another manifestation, it's another template and another manifestation of a machine as a service business model. But and we've got a few more: automated service agreements, performance warranties, energy savings, a number of different templates that we've kind of built within the context of our system. But outside of kind of all those flexible ways, kind of different ways to approach it, we also have relationships with financial institutions that are interested in backing machine as a service business models as vendor-based financing programs for our clients, for our
Yeah.
OEM customers. And so, there's a number of things that we can do here, and that's part of the consultation where we sit down with the CFO, with the business management, and we really look at how much risk they want to take and how much return they want to receive. And so anytime you're beginning to create an annuity for your customer based on performance, you're in fact financing some of that, and so there's more margin there for you because you're covering the cost of capital. But you can easily get third parties to come in and help you with some of those costs.
Well, what I loved in that answer is that you've created what I'm hearing are stepping stones to get into machine as a service. It's nothing where you need to flip that switch overnight and change the way an equipment manufacturer serving their customers. They can take the steps that get them into that.
Yep.
Speaking of steps, how where you started mentioning some of the templates. As we get to the end here, how do people get started on this? What's the first step you recommend, and how do people connect with SteamChain?
Yeah, so for us, I mean, and we should talk about our business model just in general, right?
Yeah.
Hey, it all sounds good, but of course there's a cost, right?
Right.
And so how does that work? How does an engagement traditionally flow? We've already talked. Generally we get started up front, and we help build the business model, right? We explain what can be measured, how it can be measured. We work with them to understand their business, understand the economics and their goals for the program, and we put together, with their help, a customized business model, business plan for how they're going to offer this technology or their technology to the market. And how they're going to get rewarded for doing so. And then we get into the technical discussion, right? And that's actually far easier. We've got a standardized reference architecture.
Okay.
We're control system agnostic, so we can deploy this across the whole range of common industrial architectures that exist in the world today.
Yep.
We generally, as part of our reference architecture, use technology from HMS, E1. It's a gateway device that mainly because our customers have already adopted it in a lot of cases. They're comfortable with it, and it works pretty well for us. So we can easily deploy on an E1 device, but we can deploy on an E1 device, which is our reference architecture. We can deploy directly on an industrial PC that may exist on the machine. We've deployed directly on Allen Bradley PLCs.
Always good to hear that too.
And so we have a lot of flexibility for how we deploy it, and the architecture, it's quite frankly made much simpler by all the investments people are making in IoT.
Right.
Yeah. We ride on top of whatever IoT systems that they're either already invested in and have up and running, or if they don't have something, we recommend one and ride on top of that. So we get into the technical discussion and put together the right architecture. That's actually the simpler side of the equation, and we combine those two things, the business model with the architecture. We deploy it on the machines, and at that point, once they're comfortable, they start selling those machines at scale, and that's where we really get our revenue.
Yeah.
Once they start selling machines, we take a transaction fee.
That makes sense.
Right, and so the upfront, all the consulting on the upfront is, a one-time fixed price kind of cost to them, and then the ongoing cost is a percentage transaction fee based on the business model that they're trying to run, et cetera.
Sure. Well, when the OEM, when the end user, when they're winning, you got to win as well too.
Well, that's what it boils down to,
right?
That's the
idea. You're being held accountable too.
Correct. And if the OEM doesn't make any money, if they're not getting any revenue from this, we are not either, right? Because we're a percentage of the revenue that they're seeing. And so how we design the business model and how we set that rate is really part of the discussion. So worst case scenario, any one of our clients would ever be out is that low upfront fee that we charge for the consulting, which is really just a way to make sure that everybody's invested in the idea and committed to working with us to make it a reality in their business.
Well, I love the work you're doing. I guess the thing, we talked about how you got started. We've talked about the business model, how this is something that's been borrowed from another spot. I'm curious. You're working longer hours than you're used to. You're doing more things than you used to be doing. What what drives you and what gets you up every morning right now? What keeps you going?
You know, I think it would be wrong to say that I'm working more hours than I used to. I mean, I'm somebody that's always put in the hours when I was at Rockwell or anywhere else. You know, I've always been very entrepreneurial and always interested in building things. And so a lot of my roles at Rockwell were just that. You know, my previous role running the independent moving cart business, that was actually a startup company that Rockwell had purchased that I had the opportunity to run. And so that came with its own set of complexities and challenges. And, you know, I was very proud of the work that I did with Rockwell and the state of that business now and the amount of adoption that they've seen in that emerging technology space has been just you know, gives me a lot of it gives me a lot of pleasure to kind of see that it's continuing to grow, because I invested quite a bit of time and energy into that, and now I'm investing my time and energy into SteamChain. And so in a lot of ways it's very similar. The differences are. You know, when I was at Rockwell, there was a gigantic organization, shared services, finance people, HR people, you know, all the things that you'd expect from a large corporation were there to assist me. And now, you know, we're having to handle that as a startup company. And so the things that I'm challenged with are different. I don't have as much support. I certainly don't have as much capital as a Rockwell Automation.
Right.
And so we've got to be very efficient. We've got to solve things in the most efficient way we possibly can to maximize the chances of us, you know, being successful with this company. So it's a whole new set of challenges, same amount of work, I would say. But you know, I think it's extremely rewarding for me to be you know, leading a company with such great individuals now that you know, we continue to add personnel, you know, and you know, everybody believes in the potential of this, and so there's a certain amount of pleasure in that that I think hopefully everybody on the team takes away.
Well, I was excited to connect with you guys a few months ago when I first learned about SteamChain. It's been great sharing more about your journey so far on this episode. Is there anything you wish I would have asked you that we didn't hit yet?
Well, Chris, I mean, so this is manufacturing happy hour.
This is manufacturing happy hour,
And you know, I've been a fan, and you know, even before we met, you know, I've been watching your podcasts and the things that are posted up on LinkedIn. So congratulations for what you've been able to achieve, kind of building this brand and really getting out there and doing something as creative as this. So I think that's awesome. But this is manufacturing happy hour. So the one question you didn't ask me that I wish you would have was, do you want a beer?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have them on me right now, but what? Let me ask this: what would you be drinking right now if you could?
What would I be drinking?
Any beer?
Oh, okay, so I'm a Milwaukee guy at the end of the day, and you know, my go-to is the Lakefront IPA.
Yeah,
right?
Lakefront's a great brewery in general.
I've loved that since you know, since they opened the doors over there in River West, and such a great culture and such a great business. And yeah, they've done a nice job. But that said, I mean, I got to give love to all the great breweries around Milwaukee. I mean, it's one of the great cities, in my opinion. There's so many cities now that have a great microbrewery culture. Yeah. But you know, Milwaukee, it still is Brew City. It is. At the end of the day, you know, this is a city built on beer, and I think the microbreweries here in Milwaukee are the best in the world, and a ton of diversity. Good cities doing a great job. You know, gosh, I hate to leave anybody off the list, but you know, Sprecker's been around for a long time.
The OGs. Yeah. I think there was a stat at some point. Milwaukee was adding a new brewery like every month for a solid like 2-year period.
Yeah, who are the Black Husky guys up on
you know,
Locust?
I had someone tell me about them. I haven't been yet.
That's a hot spot.
I need to make it up there.
That's not bad. I mean, gosh, when you know, I recently organized a little bit of a bike trip, bicycling on the Oak Leaf Trail, and realized that you can drive down the Oak Leaf Trail with no traffic on your bicycle, and within you know, 3/4 of a mile of that trail, you can hit, I don't know, 8 or 10 microbreweries on your ride. I wouldn't suggest you hit them all.
Yeah, especially if you're biking.
yeah,
That might be a little wobbly along the way.
But yes, such a great beer culture, and I love what you've done with manufacturing happy hour, combining kind of that entrepreneurial spirit of the microbrewing industry and framing the whole discussion around manufacturing. In that context, I think is a great approach to these podcasts.
It's been a collision of a few different worlds, from beer to manufacturing. I appreciate the kind words, but it's guys like you that fuel the show with the great things you're doing in the industry.
Well, always a pleasure to join you.
And you're right. Next time we do need to be doing this over a beer. So I feel like a part 2 will be coming one day or another.
Yeah, definitely. And we did it in the office this time, but I got a few places around town. Love to have you back, or maybe we can do it out in San Francisco on my next trip out there.
That sounds like a plan. For those of you listening, make sure to check out SteamChain. You can find them at steamchain.io to learn more about what they're doing. And in the meantime, Michael, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Nope, my pleasure. Cheers.
Cheers.